Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this Xoogler community session with Angel Investing101, a prominent executive in the startup ecosystem here in Australia. He was also an AirTree Explorer, I believe in the second cohort. I was in the first cohort, and we have Jess Walker here, who joined them recently to run the whole program. So excited that AirTree Ventures is invest even more so in such an amazing program that I bet have benefited a lot out of it since I joined. So why don't we start with some introductions? Let me get Yaniv to do something, and we're just going through a couple of questions that have been submitted, and then we'll open up to the audience. Thank you. Yaniv, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Yaniv Bernstein. I am co-founder and chief operating officer at Circular, which is a circular economy startup focusing on subscription consumer electronics. Prior to that, I was VP of Engineering and Chief Operating Officer at AirTasker. And before that, I was an engineer and engineering manager at Google. As Chris mentioned, and the reason for this call, I'm also an AirTree Explorer. And the final thing is I am the co-host of a podcast called the Startup Podcast with Chris Sard, who's another prominent person in the Australian startup community. We publish an episode weekly all about how to build, run, and work at a startup.
It's a great podcast. I do like it.
Glad to hear it.
Thanks, Yaniv. And Jess, if you don't mind doing an intro for yourself.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Jess. I look after the Explorer program here at AirTree. It's, I think, week 5 of being on the job at the moment. So if I don't know the answer to a question, I apologize and I'll find out for you. Before that, I was an investor at Black Nova Venture Capital. And then before that, I was a founder in New Zealand. I had a company doing short-term rental management services end-to-end, which was eventually acquired by a company in the UK. And I'm also on the board at Fishburners, which is a co-working space in Sydney and a second home to me. That's all about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. Everyone, I'm Chris Fong. I grew up in Sydney, went to the US for a while, was at Google in the New York and Mountain View offices, and really excited to have come back to Australia to meet a lot of folks. And I had known the AirTree folks when they visited San Francisco due to a Xoogler, Mina, he still is a co-founder of Different, one of their portfolio companies. And that she had introduced me to some of the visiting folks from AirTree from the Sydney region to San Francisco. And after a couple of visits, I got to know them. I came back to Sydney for my own visits for family reasons. And when they started this program, I was so excited to apply for it. And I was very glad to have been accepted into the program. So would love for as many Xooglers or Googlers to apply and hopefully get in. Jess will tell you more about the program, but I think that's what purpose of this call, for all of you to really know the ins and outs of the program, where it's going to go, and hopefully entice you to apply. And if you get in, we'll love to work and collaborate with you on it. So I guess before we go more into Eden's experience and background on it, why don't we ask Jess to introduce AirTree Ventures and also the Explorer program. Jess.
Yeah, absolutely. So AirTree Ventures, if you don't know, has been around for, I think, since 2012, started by a guy called Craig and Daniel. And Craig had just finished a massive company, sold that, and wanted to put money into the ecosystem. So they built AirTree Ventures. And as of this week, I think we're at 35 people. They've just raised a $700 million fund, which is split into 2 funds, which is like a origination fund where we're first check into very early stage pre-seed and seed stage deals, and then follow-on funds, Series A and further. So the AirTree Explorer program started back in 2020, and it was a way that AirTree wanted to solve a problem of the declining angel market in Australia and New Zealand, and in particular, the lack of diversity and inclusion in that space. And it's typically a very old school space to be. So we started the AirTree program back in 2020 with cohort 1, 40 people. Chris Fong was one of those. And it was just testing out, how can we create and nurture angels and help them invest into a different asset class as well. Fast forward to 2022, the program is cohort 4. Applications are open now. So basically what it is 4 different aspects to it. There's fortnightly sessions, 1.5 hours with an AirTree partner or an expert talking about Angel 101, what is angel investing, how do you as an individual fit into the angel investment sphere? Like, what's your risk profile? What kind of angel investor do you want to be? Where do you want to invest? Through to legal term sheet analysis. And then once we've learned all the theory, it's about how do you actually find those startups? And then once you do find those startups, what kind of due diligence do you need to do on those founders and on those startups to actually assess whether it's the right business for you to invest in? So that's kind of the content. We talk a lot about syndicates, and then we go deeper into Angel 2.0, which is more portfolio management, cap table management, and kind of what your journey as an angel will look like. Alongside that, it's the community and the network of people that is kind of one of the most incredible parts about this. There's over 100 angels across Australia and New Zealand now, and they range from all different sectors. They share deal flow, they invest alongside each other. We're looking to bring in an AirTree syndicate, which people can join. And then what I've also brought in is called Explorers in the Wild, where we actually go out to regions and, in our local areas and find pitch nights and find events where founders actually are, so we can go and find them and, start to build those relationships. And then take home tasks as well. And I think that's it. Community catch-ups. So that's one of the best parts about it, I think, is the networking events that we have throughout the program as well. So it's a kind of choose your own adventure style program where you don't really have to go to everything, but it's recommended, and it's up to you to make the most of what's on offer.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. And I know some people who may be joining via a call or watching this later, if you're busy with your day job or don't see that angel investing is something you're going to be doing in the short term, but investing in this program for the long term, it is a minimum of 1.5 hours per fortnight, and then choose your own adventure to really add to your experience if you do have the time. So if you're too afraid of, wow, there's so much to do, but please don't. Still consider applying, and Jess will make sure that you're not too overwhelmed with her expertise and skills of running the program. So what do we turn over to Yaniv? Yaniv, you've been an exec and really famous in the startup ecosystem in Australia. Even before you applied for the program, be part of the program, you were on an executive team that brought Airtasker public. So why did you decide to apply for the program?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I decided to apply for the program because I guess I'd reached that stage where I wanted to get more involved with the startup community. I felt I had learned a few things the hard way. I wanted to help with that and build my network. And also, I think I felt that I was in a position to start supporting some startups through angel investments. And I'd started doing that, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So I felt the AirTree Explorer program would offer me a combination of basic education in being an investor, which is, something that's quite scary when you don't know what's going on, and it can be a bit clubby, like in the sense of people throw around a bunch of jargon and just expect you to understand it. So demystifying that, and then also building up the network, both in terms of other investors, and it turned out that the investment community is a community of its own, which is nice to be a part of, and also just learning more about the different startups out there, and being exposed to more of that too.
That's awesome. And so you applied for it and you got into the program, and the program itself, Jess had mentioned a few different components of it. What was the most interesting part for you and the most useful?
Yeah, so it was all pretty useful, to be honest. Like I said, I think in a way, the sort of at the practical level, the most useful thing was really just understanding the process, things about term sheets, safes, pro rata rights, all this jargon, which, there are other places you can find it, but just being able to discuss it in an accessible and safe way, so that when you're actually talking to founders about potential investments, you can focus on the product and the team and, the potential, rather than trying to understand what the hell they're talking about from an investment point of view. But yeah, in a way, that the most interesting and also useful session was when they brought on a number of founders who shared their experience of working with angel investors, which meant that it allowed you to more fully understand the role, which is, it's not just putting money in, it's also you become part of the expanded team in a sense for a company, and how you can add value, and also how, in a sense, you can make yourself a compelling investor, because angel investment is often about much more than just the money, because often the amount of money is quite small. And like I said, you become part of the expanded team. It's how do you present yourself, and how do you think of yourself as a member of that expanded team, and show that you would be a valuable person to have on board.
Great. Jess, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's a really good point. We actually have part of one of our sessions we've built out is how can you be more than just money to these founders, and getting people to realize that, the angel it's not like angel hierarchy, founder here, founder needs money from the angel. It's very, very equal, because if an angel invests in a great founder, they're the ones that are winning as well. So it's making people realize it's a very equal playing field, and how can you support them as much as possible. Yeah.
And so from my standpoint, when I joined the program, what was really fascinating was you really get to know the AirTree team, and now it's grown even more so on an intimate level, for small groups in terms of Zoom calls, in-person sessions, but also being able to sit in on the investment committee. I think that's a awesome opportunity, being an explorer, where I was invited when I brought a deal in to get it considered to be invested in, to position it to the investment committee, also hear how the AirTree Ventures IC actually make decisions, move forward with different investments. So the insight they do share, it's not just them giving us information in a formal setting, it's also these informal meetings that they invite us into. And if there's a interesting investment opportunity, they could actually invest in. And maybe, Jess, you can talk more about that. I mean, that's one of the incredible parts. You're actually providing resources to invest in startups, right? Would you mind expanding more of how that part could work?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the parts is we want to try and encourage people to invest in as many startups as they can. And if it works for their risk profile, obviously. But if an AirTree Explorer brings a founder or a startup to us that we haven't seen yet, that we end up investing in, we will co-invest alongside that Angel Explorer and end up putting in $5,000 to $10,000 on behalf of them into that company as well. So it's a nice to have. It's something that we want to encourage more people to do, because we're not saying to people you have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to become an angel investor. You can start off with $1,000, but also we can help you along the way as well. So from the program, I think we've had about 5 investments made over the last 2 years, which is pretty amazing considering AirTree only invests in 10 to 15 companies a year. And so, yeah, once we invest alongside those people as well.
Yeah, could I just add to that? I think a really valuable part of this AirTree Explorer program is it really is about accessibility and making this type of investment possible for people who don't have those resources, as Jess said. And there's actually a couple of ways that happens. One is this co-investment, or I believe, Jess, it's nearly more like a bounty. So you don't even have to invest yourself if you don't have the money. If you bring a company to AirTree and AirTree ends up investing off your referral, then you will get that cut, I guess, of the investment. So
yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
you did it correctly.
So I think that's really important from an accessibility point of view. But then the other thing that I guess I learned through this that is less intuitive is that I was talking about being part of the extended team and bringing more than money. There's a funny kind of reverse logic, which is the more useful you are as an angel investor, the smaller the check size the founders will be willing to consider. So in other words, if you're really just money, if you're just a checkbook, they might be like, we're a minimum $50,000 check. But if they're like, we really want to have you on the cap table, we really want you associated with our company, helping our company, they might go down to 5,000 or even 1,000. So it's nearly like it's a weird reverse negotiation, which is like, how little of my money are you willing to take? And so by learning how you position yourself, it actually makes it more accessible for you to make investments without a lot of capital.
Exactly. And even sometimes you don't even make an investment. You come on as an advisor and you might get 1 to 1.5%, 2%. And then that may be worth a lot more in the future anyway. So yeah, if you can offer that value, that's amazing.
It's awesome. So why don't we dig really into the application form and the questions, and then after that, we'll open up to the audience questions. But I think that's a really good background already of the program itself. So I'm going to read through a couple of the questions that were actually in the application form, and perhaps Jesse can share more about what you're looking for in answers, and Yaniv can share more perhaps about what he put in. I can share more about perhaps what I put in as well. So the first question is, why do you want to be an AirTree Explorer?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I've just been going through, I think I've looked about 400 applications yesterday. And I don't actually know if I like this question anymore, because everyone just says, I really want to learn about how to invest and, give back to the community, which is lovely, but that's the exact same answer every time. So that one for me is good. It gets you thinking about why you want to be an Angel Explorer. Not necessarily great for the application process because everyone's answer is pretty much the same. But yeah, if you haven't got a good answer for that, then it's already a cutoff. That's an easy one. I'm probably not going to use that one next time.
Yaniv, I think in your intro, you probably answered that already. Do you want to add anything else to what perhaps you had filled in?
I honestly can't remember what I filled in, but
no worries, that's all right.
But yeah, I really think it was about like access in a sense. Like I said, it can feel like a club that you don't quite know how to break into. You don't know the people, you don't know the jargon, you don't know the etiquette, the sort of unwritten rules. And I just wanted that friction to be removed from my ability to be involved in this ecosystem.
Great. So next question, and this is the second last question now. What is your unique network of potential founders and how might you grow it?
Yeah, so this one is the one that I look at the most. We're trying to bring people that are already in the space, already have been in startups for a very long time, or already have worked with people doing startups that are now wanting to go onto the other side. I mean, there's so many people that are investment bankers, but they're investment bankers that know how to invest probably, or they know, a lot more than your average startup founder that they want to become an investor. So this one is more to do with how connected are you already? How will you be able to bring something to your fellow cohort and say, here's some deal flow that I found for the fellow cohort. Let's do this together. Yeah, I think it's already having an interest in the space is key.
Yaniv, how would you remember what about what you filled in? If you would fill it in today, what is your unique network of potential founders and how might you grow it? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm glad I'm not applying again because I'm not sure how good I am at answering it. But yeah, I guess in my case, I've done a fair bit of, I guess, social media and kind of networking that way, in the sense of I've been active, quite active on LinkedIn for years now. And like I said, I have a podcast, I have a newsletter. So I guess I've built some credibility that way with a cohort of founders who, are interested in what I have to say. And so that allows me to bring them. And then of course, it's just that case of having been in the ecosystem, having worked at scale up companies and gone to various events and so on, and gotten to know people who know people. And so, yeah, it's really a case of, if you have been helpful to people in some way, then they will, in a sense, be a receptive part of your network. They'll think of you when they're raising or when they want advice. And so I think that's just something that I've built up over a number of years. And that's sort of how I did it. But, I think a lot of the other founders had kind of more interesting stories. Not the other founders, the other participants, the other explorers had more interesting stories than me, in the sense of, they've worked in some deep tech space, or they've been advocates for some underrepresented group and have deep networks there. And I think that's, again, from my understanding, and definitely I see that AirTree kind of walk the talk here. It is about bringing in that diversity of people who maybe wouldn't be traditional investors because of the area that they're in or their access to resources, and making it possible for them to be involved.
Yeah.
So for those people, it's like, okay, where is it that I play, where I spend a lot of my time, where there are actually really interesting things happening that I could bring that community in touch with the more traditional investor community.
The way I answered it was that having found the Xoogler community, that's an interesting access for meeting a lot of cool founders and doing a lot of events and programming, which all of you can do that as well. So interesting founders. And the second thing is I was using my same way of helping founders from the ex-Google community to help people from my high school. So that was how I answered it in terms of how I might grow it too. So why don't we go to the next question? Which pre-seed, seed stage company do you wish you could invest in today, and why? How did you find out about them? Jess, what are your thoughts of this question? What are you looking for, I guess?
Yeah, we're looking for people to, this one's easy to kind of take out the ones that don't answer it well, because we're looking for people that are already thinking about the space, or already wanting to invest, or already wanting to understand more about a certain company and learn how we do the due diligence, but maybe are doing a little bit themselves. And it kind of just shows very quickly whether or not where their interests lie as well. Yes, that I like that question, and it's interesting seeing what the answers are. And some people are saying Canva, but we're like, okay, no, but what are the pre-seed and seed stage deals? Maybe we would have invested in that a long time ago, and that's great. But what are you looking at now? What kind of startups can you see in the ecosystem that you particularly like? So yeah, I do like that one.
Yaniv, do you remember what you filled in for this one?
In between when I filled in this form and now, I had COVID, and it's pretty much wiped out my brain. So I can't even. No, but I can't remember a particular company I named, but I know that there were a number of pre-seed stage companies who I was talking to about potential angel investments at the time I was considering joining the Explorer program. So I imagine I listed some of them. And what really appealed to me about those sorts of companies was that, really a combination of an ambitious and talented founder and a well-considered and very large ambition. And so I think probably the one I listed was a company called Abbey Health, which is actually it's a health tech product that is basically about, especially people with cancer at the moment is their focus. It's really important to track symptoms between visits to the doctor, and people are very bad at tracking and journaling their symptoms. So this is basically an app that uses natural language processing, behavioral prompts, and so on, to make it much easier for people to track their symptoms. Incredible founder story. It's a young guy who watched his dad die of cancer and be a bit of a typical man and be terrible about actually tracking his symptoms, and saw how that made things more difficult. And so really good founder story. He already had a lot of interest from clinicians and a viable business model, in the sense that insurers and healthcare providers were interested in paying for this thing. And it just seemed like all the right ingredients were there, and they needed to come together, and the ambition was large. So that was one that was really interesting to me, and I did end up investing in them.
Thanks, Yaniv. And where I answered it, I pasted the answer here for those joining live, is a founder who was introduced to me by a husband, but I had known her previously. She started a social e-commerce app, and it's doing very well now. And essentially what Yaniv was saying, just somehow find something which is not Canva. Don't put Canva in, and say perhaps how you met them and why would you invest in today, and just really understanding perhaps the market and why it's interesting, how big it is. I think there's a lot of businesses which could be good businesses, but perhaps not venture style businesses. So perhaps try to think through, are they going to be big enough? Would it get over $1 billion? Would it be an international business, not just addressing Australia and New Zealand. If it's Australia and New Zealand, perhaps it is in the property tech or fintech markets, but that's big enough perhaps to be an interesting enough company. But I think that's where I would suggest thinking through how you would answer this question. So
I think in saying that though, I mean, you don't have to look at it being $1 billion company, because this program is specifically for angels, and angel investing versus VC investing is quite a different beast. So, I mean, if it was purely for a VC, then maybe, we want to look at $100 million ARR. But as an angel, you may not need that high amount of money, which is probably very likely. So the companies you're looking for may not need to be the unicorns.
Great. And so the answer to these questions is, for this one question, Jess, is you're looking for people who see how they think about investing in businesses.
Exactly. Yeah. So reading your answer here, it's very well thought through. You're looking at team, market. You're telling us the story. So this is a really, really great answer. But it's not necessarily, is this going to be $1 billion company? It's just, what's your thought process, and are you already looking out for these types of startups in the ecosystem?
Great. Thanks for the feedback. So why don't we go to audience questions, folks? Why don't you unmute and ask any questions you like?
I can go first if you don't mind, Mantas here. So just a question in terms of investment geography. You're particularly looking at backing deals for Australia and New Zealand, or you also have more global scope with this program?
Yeah, primarily Australia and New Zealand. So everybody in the cohort will be located in Australia and New Zealand, with the lens of backing more Australian and New Zealand companies. Yeah, I would like to go global, but we probably support our own teams here first.
Okay.
I mean, it's just worth adding to that, Jess. I mean, AirTree does invest in non-Australian, New Zealand domiciled companies, but
yes,
at a lower rate. So I guess it's not, I know this from personal experience, it's not that non-Australian companies are completely off the table, but probably, yeah, it's just not the focus. Yeah.
And just a second question, if you don't mind, when you're looking at forming this cohort, obviously you have a lot of applications. Are you trying to look for a little bit specific skill sets? So, like, are you looking for another 40 Chris's and Yanips, or are you looking for essentially, picking people that would deliberately be very different to kind of form those cohorts and have that diversity in place?
The latter, definitely. So looking at not only diversity in terms of more women and more people of color, but definitely more diverse skill sets as well. Yeah, if we get 40 completely different people, which I'm sure we will, I'd be very happy.
Jeremy, I think you had a question.
Yeah, hey folks, it's Jeremy here. I applied for cohort 2 and wasn't successful, but I'm here because thanks to Chris, I'm keen to rethink that. The feedback at the time was that that cohort was particularly looking at people who already had deeper networks in Australia. I'd only been 2 years back in the country myself, so I felt that was really useful feedback for me, because that was really resonated with why there were very likely to be more exciting applicants than me. Has anything changed about selection criteria on AirTree's side? And if no, any advice on how I might be able to highlight what I've been up to or what I've done to re-Australianize myself?
Yeah, so no, it hasn't changed. We're still looking for those deep networks. And I think, I mean, some of the applications are very high, surface level. So if you go a little bit deeper and you tell us a little bit more about like what you've done over the last 2 years, or who you're connected to and how you're connected to them, do you attend pitch nights, or do you have a podcast like Yaniv? Like those types of things really stand out. So if whatever you've done to help or be part of the startup ecosystem, that's going to be really beneficial.
Gotcha, thanks.
Jeremy, if you want to start a Xoogler Australia podcast, let me know and we'll help you.
Yeah.
I'll watch out for that.
Thanks so far. It was a super useful session. I was just wondering, like, you read so many applications. You mentioned you had like 400 to go through yesterday. how
Yeah.
much detail do you want us to go into?
Oh. I mean, part of my process was, because there's so many, I just look for the ones that have less than 5 words per answer, and then I'm just like graying them out because they haven't thought about it enough and there's just too many to go through. So more than that. But don't give us an essay. Like a paragraph per question is perfectly fine. And even bullet points, whatever. It's just kind of highlighting why you want to be part of it and what you have to bring to startups.
Perfect. And then one for Chris and Yanni. In terms of, like, I think you both have startup experience and potentially some investing experience before this program. What changed about your investment thesis or how you approach investment after the program?
Chris, do you want to go first? Or?
I'll go first, and maybe as you answer, something may come back. As Jess said, she was very clear, right, where the answer to the last question. You may be successful as an angel is not a good deal for a VC, and vice versa. I think of what you need, but even if you put in a great angel check, you may get diluted so much that it's not that interesting at the end. But you may also put in an angel check that a VC may never want to invest or could invest because of just the type of business. So I think it's really about how to be a successful angel from the perspective of how making the numbers work, I would say. And it's, look, a small check in Canvas first round is amazing, right? But then how many Canvas would there be in Australia? So how do you really think about diversifying your portfolio? If you have X amount you want to invest, how do you really think about that? That's probably some interesting insights, especially in the Australian market. But I've had investing experience overseas, but really getting deeper in the Australian, New Zealand market and what categories work or categories don't. And I had written out my OKRs specifically as well, what I wanted to learn. And one of them was really knowing about Australian, New Zealand market, what would work and what wouldn't work here. So I think that's where benefited me most. But I think the real answer is really getting more access to the AirTree team, right? They've had so much amazing experience in Australia, New Zealand, but also international. Well, a lot of their folks that worked international as well. So I've really enjoyed getting to know them. Since you asked this question around what else I got out of it, I'll finish up. Maybe you can also share more. Slack group across cohorts. Person from, I think, cohort 2 or cohort 3, James Stewart. I'm not sure if Jess, if you knew which cohort he was, but he was very welcoming, and I got to meet him for coffee, and he shared more insights into what he knew about a specific business I'm trying to start. It's a coffee shop. So he was helping me with that idea. And so they're welcome to anyone and everyone, just that AirTree just formed this community that way. And when James, one of the partners, had gone down to Melbourne, I tagged along to go down to his trip, and I got to meet people in Melbourne who I wouldn't have met otherwise. So I organized that Xoogler community down in Melbourne on that piggyback of that trip. So, and I was able to bounce different ideas with a few different explorers down in Melbourne, and we stayed in touch. So probably the people, whether it's the AirTree team or it's the ways they've pulled together the explorers. So.
Yeah, of course, Chris, you and James are crazy ass extroverts, so you both stand out for that. So, very, very good networkers. But yeah, I think, a couple of things. I guess I don't feel like my core thesis changed, but it increased my confidence. And like I said, that actually makes a big difference because, for example, I was able to negotiate smaller check sizes, which actually meant I could make more investments. Like I said, that weird paradoxical thing. Because quite often a founder will say, oh, we're a minimum $25,000. And I'm like, well, that's out of my league right now. Can you go lower? And so instead of just kind of passing, we actually ended up, able to make investments in certain startups. And then the other couple of things is, of course, there's deal flow that comes in from the Explorer program itself. People share their deals. You can also sort of bump ideas off each other. And the final thing that actually happened when I put the Explorer tag like on my LinkedIn profile is I started getting more inbound. I started getting people who basically it was a way of people saying, oh, okay, this person's sort of serious about investing. So if I'm keen to have them involved with my company, I can kind of pitch them. And so that's actually just been, less about changing my thesis and my approach, but about getting access to more good opportunities from people who are, I guess, keen to get me involved, which is nice, but also I've generally found it's indicative that, if they want me involved, it's because they share various aspects of my worldview. So they've kind of filtered themselves in a sense for me. And I found that most of those deals coming in are at least interesting.
I think you've also got such a good network yourself, and you've almost got like that angel brand. I think it was Harry Stebbing said back in the day when you were an angel, you wanted to kind of hide from everyone because founders were bombarding you. And now there's so many angels. It's how do you get them to talk to you and get that inbound deal flow? So I think all of your other social media things that you do are obviously very, very useful for that.
And Preeti, the last thing I'll mention is, since I do a lot of international investing as well, having a perspective to get their feedback and thoughts from the investment partners here in Australia is also useful. And they've always made themselves available and very responsive. So I think that's a big plus for me, having such a great support and folks I know I can ping anytime. So
Great, thank
any
you.
final questions, Mantas or Preeti?
Actually, one more for Yaniv.
Anytime.
In terms of like your founder journey, has it changed your perspective after doing this program?
That's actually a really good question.
Mm.
I think the answer is yes, but let me pause for a moment and actually, try to compose my thoughts. I have felt that it, having been on both sides of the table, it increases empathy, right? It means that I am better able to understand how investors think and what they're looking for and what resonates with them. And I don't mean that in a manipulative way. It means the partnership works better, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, I understand what the angel investor is looking for out of this relationship. So for example, and I'm not in charge of this, I've got a CEO, but like investor updates, I've now felt the anxiety of being an investor and not having heard for months from a founder. And I'm like, I wonder what's going on there. And I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be that naggy investor, but why don't I know what's going on there? And so it sort of reinforces as a founder what the good practices are, right? Around sending investor updates and things like that. How to talk to investors. I think it's made me more confident in pitching to investors because I have a genuine empathy for how they think because I am one myself. So, I feel like everything I've done, like, playing a number of different roles in the community now, like, founder, investor, the podcasting stuff, the community stuff, it actually, each one of them makes me better at the other one because you're getting this sort of triangulation effect. So yeah, I found it really valuable.
Thank you.
Mantas, any final questions?
Just probably curious to hear for the successful deals that you had coming through this program where AirTree co-invested as well. Maybe you can share some examples of those startups and how they've come about and why they decided to invest. As you mentioned, angel goals and VC goals might be different. So just curious to hear about those cases where those goals kind of work together for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I probably can't talk to it very well because I've only been here for 5 weeks and don't know how they came about, but two of the ones that we can talk about briefly is Cypher Stash. So they're a encryption storage facility. And that was brought on by, he was already an existing angel, Matt Allen. He brought it to the table. He was already investing, and then AirTree really loved it and invested alongside them. I think it was only a small check, but it was still an investment, and then one from another angel called Equal, and they're a commerce hype drop platform. Again, I don't know why they invested because I wasn't part of that conversation, but those are the two that we can talk about. And then there's 3 others that haven't been announced yet that have come through the pipeline as well. I'm sorry, that's not a very good answer.
No, all good. Equal is a Xoogler startup, right, Chris?
Yep. Xoogler startup. Yaniv also is an investor in them. Xoogler.
Did you guys bring it in?
It was
no. I think that was Matt as well. So I mean, by the way, I think Equal is a great example of the sort of tight level of connection once you're in the community, and it doesn't take long. That's the other thing that's shocking. You know, Matt Allen mentioned this. Like, Matt Allen is kind of seen as a granddaddy of the angel investment scene and a bit of a legend. He's been doing it for 7 years, which is really not long in the scheme of a lifetime. So you go from 0 to, oh, you're a well-known investor very quickly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Equal is interesting because Chris invested in them through the Xoogler fund. I used to manage one of the Xooglers who's the founder. So they brought me in as an angel investor. That was my very first angel investment.
Oh.
And then Matt, brought them into the Explorer program and AirTree invested. So it's kind of like we're all friends and there's a kinship, right? I think it's made it easier for me to work with AirTree. And, you know, we've been going through a capital raise with Circular at the moment. And so the fact that we have these connections is valuable when you're having these conversations. And again, that's why I think this Explorer program is so valuable, because the fact is, whether you like it or not, this whole scene is very network driven. And so bringing more diverse people who might have difficulty normally breaking into that network as easily is a real value add. But yeah, everyone's got a piece of Equal in this conversation, and it's, I think it's sort of, it's been nice. It's something we can kind of nearly bond over, right? We're co-investors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perhaps the last thing I'll say is the AirTree team is investing in the Explorer program in so many different ways, whether it's the partnerships time, the people's time, even having a headcount like Jess come in. So I think you'll be able to see a lot more developments, whether it's for cohort 4 or even future cohorts. I'm not sure whether there's any last words, Yaniv or Jess, you want to share with people here or people watching this recording later?
Yeah, actually, just, now that I mentioned it, I wanted to double down on that as another benefit of doing this, which, and, to your question, Preeti, is if you have more connections into the investor community, if you're a founder now, or if you're considering being a founder in the future, or even if you just want to help other founders, being part of that ecosystem makes capital raising a lot more pleasant, because, instead of going around begging for warm intros to various VCs, you already know them, you might be co-invested with them, you've chatted with them kind of from the same side of the table. So when you flip over to the other side, you can actually bring that relationship with you, and that's really useful.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. When you have multiple different angels vouching for you without even having to ask, it's pretty nice. I heard about Yaniv like 10 times before I met him this morning. So I think it's about kind of shifting the mindset of, you don't have to be extremely wealthy to start being an angel investor. And that's kind of what we're trying to start to instill in people. You could be a part of a syndicate and put $1,000 in a company. Sure, it might not be a massive amount of money, but it's getting there and it's starting out on your journey. And so, yeah, if anyone has an interest in doing it and wants to apply, then go for it, please. I look forward to reading many, many more applications.
And last minute, Paolo appears.
Hello. Do you have any last minute questions before we wrap up? You watch the recording later, but is there any
nice to see your face.
You wanted to make sure you got answered? But back to you, Paulo, just in case you need some time. It's even if the cohort starts in September, ends in November. There's going to be future cohorts. Why I would recommend you applying now is one, Jess came on board 5 weeks ago. She's bringing new energy, but also new content too. That's one. two is, even if this is not the right program for you, if your application goes in and just reads it, maybe there's other programs that AirTree may have for you that could be really relevant and interesting. So they don't know about you if you don't apply. So definitely apply. And even if you're a bit busier for this September, November, can devote more than 1.5 hours per fortnight. There could be really some other interesting things for you to get involved with. This is a perfect timing since just started 5 weeks ago. So Paulo, any quick questions before we wrap up today?
No, thank you.
No worries.
Nice to see you.
For those who are watching this on a recording, the deadline to apply is 22nd of July. Please apply before then. If you need a recommendation from Yaniv or myself, please let us know. Feel free to reach out. And I don't think you regret applying. It's not that long application, as you heard from Jess. She wants short answers, not long essays. So I think part of it is please apply, and I would be happy to do that for you to help the Xoogler community. Jess, I know you have another session today, so thank you so much for giving us your time, the Xoogler community, and you've always my favorite Xoogler here in Australia. So
I'm putting that on my
thank
profile.
you for all that you do here.
Chris's favorite.
Upset everyone else.
No, please. And then people ask, how do I become your favorite Xoogler in Australia? So thanks, Preeti. Thanks, Mantis. And thanks, Paula, for joining as well.
Thank you,
This is
everyone.
great.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you, folks.
Everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.